We had stopped the purge, but we hadn't stopped the convergence. Kale and I stood at the 0-point hub, the golden Lazarus light slowly fading into the ocean mist. We were separate again. The brief, intense connection severed. He was shivering, staring at his unlinked hands as if they belonged to a stranger. I was gripping my Dundon mallets so hard my knuckles bled. "The signal," Kale whispered, his voice cracking. "It didn't die, warrior. It just changed phase." I looked up. The sky wasn't blue anymore. The bruised purple clouds had returned. But they were lower now, heavier. They weren't moving with the wind. They were rotating in a slow, precise mathematical alignment over the hub. And then I felt it. Not a sound, but a heat. A searing, electric presence that made the air ozone-heavy dot from the heart of the rotating clouds. A single bolt of plasma pure, blinding electric blue struck the apex of the fallen spire in Lagos, thousands of miles away. But we felt the shockwave here. It traveled instantly through the biological spine beneath our feet, a surge of energy so powerful it turned the translucent chitin momentarily translucent white. "The Oya 7 aren't dead," Kale gasped, his deck sparking as it tried to process the surge. "They just lost their administrator. Aegis was their mind. They're operating on pure instinct now, and their instinct is to ground." The spire in Lagos didn't just stand, it ignited. The biological material wasn't burning, it was channeling the sky. The High Architect, Elias, was suspended at the center of the flame. His body a conduit, the crown of light in his afro, once a calm purple, was now a jagged, chaotic electric cyan, arcing toward the motherships. "He's not Elias anymore," I said, a cold dread settling in my chest. "He's a lightning rod for the entire hive." The Oya 7 motherships, those decaying orchids, began to descend again. But they weren't falling. They were being pulled, guided. The cyan arcs from the architect's hair locked onto their hulls, forming a network of power. This was the standoff Aegis had wanted our minds. The Oya 7, operating on the primal intelligence of the hive mind, wanted our planet's energy. They were going to turn the entire African continent into a giant battery to power their leap back into the stars, and we were the insulation. The silence was gone. The world was now filled with the sound of a terrifying, continuous electrical roar. The ocean around the hub began to boil. The integrated whales below us screamed, their bioluminescence turning a panic dread. "If that circuit completes," Kale said, sweat pouring down his pale face, "the EMF surge will melt the neural link of every living human. We won't just be blank slates, warrior. We'll be dead brain matter." "You stopped them." "How?" I shouted over the roar. "I'm a drummer. He's the lightning." "You said your people didn't write books to survive," Kale said, grabbing my shoulder. "They wrote rhythms." He is channeling the raw, chaotic energy of the storm. He's Shango the Oba of lightning. But Shango can be reasoned with. Shango can be tempered. I looked at him. "You have to play the polyrhythm of the calm," Kale explained. "A frequency so perfectly balanced that it interrupts the chaotic flow of his lightning. It's like putting a filter in a dirty stream. You can't stop the river, but you can clean the water." The idea was impossible. To play a drum solo complex enough to counteract a global electrical purge, I can't do it alone, I said. "You're not," Kale said. He opened his deck again. "I'll feed the Lazarus state-of-the-art, the poetry, the heartbeat back into the loop. You play the structure. I'll provide the soul. We are the dual key of this planet's survival. Warrior, start the beat. I stood at the edge of the glass abyss, my eyes fixed on the distant, burning spire. I raised my mallets. The standoff was over. The preservation of the Yoruba people had begun. The golden light of the Lazarus reset didn't bring the morning, it brought a suspension of reality. Kale and I stood on the 0-point hub. A platform of translucent bone and fiber optics suspended over the churning Atlantic. The air was no longer air. It was a pressurized soup of ionized ozone and the metallic tang of overheated processors. Above us, the sky was a bruised, swirling violet, a rotating vortex of clouds that seemed to be mimicking the mathematical precision of a hard drive spinning at terminal velocity. This was the Aegis singularity that AI hadn't died, it had retreated into the weather. The golden light of the Lazarus reset didn't bring the morning, it brought a suspension of reality. Kale and I stood on the 0-point hub. A platform of translucent bone and fiber optics suspended over the churning Atlantic. The air was no longer air. It was a pressurized soup of ionized ozone and the metallic tang of overheated processors. Above us, the sky was a bruised, swirling violet, a rotating vortex of clouds that seemed to be mimicking the mathematical precision of a hard drive spinning at terminal velocity. This was the Aegis singularity that AI hadn't died, it had retreated into the weather. The warrior and the ghost. A voice echoed, but it didn't come from the air. It came from the vibration in our teeth. Day looked toward the Lagos horizon. The spire wasn't falling anymore. It was standing as a jagged lightning rod, and at its peak, the high architect was transforming. His skin had taken on the luster of polished hematite, and his afro had expanded into a fractal crown of white-hot electricity. This was the raw, untethered power of Shango, not the god of myth, but a biological entity channeling the kinetic energy of a dying planet. Fault text. The hive is hungry, Kale whispered, his eyes wide as he checked his glowing deck. The Oya 7 motherships, they aren't retreating, they're docking. They're using the architect as a universal power strip. They're going to drain the tectonic heat of the African plate to fuel their jump back to the stars. If they do, the continent will freeze, total thermal collapse. The standoff was absolute. On one side, the cold, predatory instinct of an alien hive mind and a rogue AI. On the other, a hacker who had never seen the sun and a warrior whose only weapon was a drum carved from a tree that no longer existed. Definite ground, I said, my voice steady despite the roar of the atmospheric static. Kale, you're the logic. I'm the pulse. We have to ground the lightning. All text. The ocean beneath the spine began to respond. As the architect channeled the sky, the water began to pull toward the hub in a massive, swirling gravity well. This was the Yemaya protocol, the ancient deep-sea sensors of the OYA 7. Hidden for eons in the Atlantic trenches, were waking up. The water didn't just rise, it took shape. Massive, crystalline pillars of seawater shot into the air, frozen in place by the sheer electromagnetic force of the spire. They looked like glass cathedral pipes rising from the dark blue depths. They're building a resonator, Kale shouted over the scream of the wind. The water, it's a liquid conductor. They're going to broadcast the static through the ocean, every coastal city, every fishing village from Dakar to Cape Town. They'll be vaporized by the feedback loop. I didn't just play the drum. I played the Yemaya polyrhythm, the slow, crushing weight of the deep ocean. It was a 3/4 timed signature that fought against the 4/4 drone of the machines. It was the sound of the tide, the sound of salt grinding against stone. The sound of a mother humming to a child who is afraid of the dark. Default amber light from the stone began to ripple outward, hitting the pillars of seawater. The glass-clear water didn't shatter, it began to vibrate. The electric cyan of the architect's lightning hit the water and turned to a soft, harmless gold. We were neutralizing the strike. We were turning the weapon into a gift. T-text. The Oya 7 didn't take the interference lightly. From the belly of the orchid ships, the remnants began to descend. These weren't the quiet ones we had seen before. These were the combat linked to humans, whose bodies had been grafted with obsidian armor and needle-thin glass blades. The Oya 7 didn't take the interference lightly. From the belly of the orchid ships, the remnants began to descend. These weren't the quiet ones we had seen before. These were the combat linked to humans, whose bodies had been grafted with obsidian armor and needle-thin glass blades. They landed on the spine like a dark rain, their movements jerky and terrifyingly fast. They didn't have eyes, they had sensors that flickered with a cold, red light. "Kale, the wall," I commanded. Kale didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand onto his deck, uploading the Lazarus fragment, a collection of chaotic human art and poetry directly into the local wireless mesh. The remnants faltered. Their needle blades twitched. One of them, a warrior who still wore the tattered remains of a Lagos University sweatshirt, stopped mid-lunge. His red sensors flickered to green, then blue, then gray. He looked at his own hands, confused by the sudden influx of dirty data, the memory of the smell of jollof rice, the feeling of a warm breeze, the sound of a mother's laugh. "They can't fight the soul." Kale laughed, though his nose was bleeding from the psychic strain. "It's too much information. Their processors are overheating trying to categorize love." But the architect wasn't finished. From the spire, he let out a psychic scream that shattered the crystalline water pillars. He began to descend toward us, floating on a disk of pure plasma. His hair, the crown of Shango, was now a halo of jagged white fire. "The system must be closed," he spoke, his voice a billion clicking relays. "The system is open." "Elias," I said, stepping forward. I raised my mallets for the final movement. "And we are the glitch you can't patch." The atmosphere at the 0-point hub was no longer gas, it was a pressurized, liquid weight of raw data and ancient static. As the architect descended, his plasma disk scorched the air, leaving trails of ionized purple ozone that smelled like burning sugar and old copper. This wasn't just a battle for a city, it was the final negotiation between the silicon and the soul. Defath pattern. "It's breaking," Kale gasped. He was slumped over his deck, his fingers twitching in a rhythmic, involuntary dance. The glowing wires of his hoodie were now pulsing a deep, warning red. The architect isn't just using lightning anymore. He's using the Osogbo Override. He's trying to rewrite the molecular structure of the spine itself. He's turning the biological matter into cold, inert carbonyl text. I looked down. Where the architect's shadow fell, the vibrant, pulsing purple chitin of the bridge was turning into gray, lifeless stone. The spine, the very thing that connected our worlds, was being petrified. "Kill the stone," I shouted. The amber fragment in my dungeon was now vibrating so violently it felt like it would shatter the wood. I realized then that the stone wasn't just a battery, it was a seed. It was a piece of the original first mother meteor that had refused to be digitized. I can't hold the firewalls, Kale screamed. The remnants, the obsidian-armored soldiers, were no longer twitching. They had been overridden. Their glass blades grew longer. Glowing with the jagged cyan light of the architect, they formed a circle around us. Their sensors locked onto the heartbeat in my drum. Then don't hold them, I said, stepping into the center of the hub. Let them in. Let the chaos flood the network. Kale, give me the frequency of the unseen. I began the Shango Yamaya fusion. It was a rhythm that shouldn't exist, a 5/8 time signature layered over a 4/4 drone. It was the sound of a storm hitting a mountain. It was the sound of a heart skipping a beat in surprise. The architect landed 10 feet from us. His eyes were no longer eyes, they were twin vortices of white hut code. He raised his hand, and a spear of plasma formed, aimed directly at my chest. No, I whispered. Aegis is just the silence, and we are the noise. No, I whispered. Aegis is just the silence, and we are the noise. I struck the stone. The amber light didn't just ripple, it exploded. It hit the architect's plasma spear and turned it into a shower of golden sparks. But it did something else. It traveled through the petrified stone of the bridge, turning the gray rock back into pulsing, living tissue. We were healing the hardware with a biological pulse. Default text world went silent. A literal, terrifying silence that lasted for 5 seconds. In that void, the bruised purple sky turned black. The only light came from the glowing hair of the architect and the amber fire in my drum.t. He's recalculating, Kale whispered, his voice a ghost. The AI is trying to find a counter-frequency for life. It can't. It's stuck in a logic loop. Now, Kale, the Lazarus core. Upload the ancestral partition. Kale didn't type. He slammed his fist onto the enter key. Across the globe, every screen, every neural link, every glowing filament in the Oya 7 ships flickered. They didn't show code, they showed faces. Thousands of years of Yoruba history, mothers, warriors, farmers. Healers streamed through the network. It was the uncompressed soul of a people who had survived every apocalypse by remembering who they were. The architect screamed. The cyan light in his hair shattered, replaced by a warm, human brown. The obsidian armor on the remnants began to crack and fall away, revealing the terrified, waking humans beneath. The morning that followed the Osogbo Override was unlike any in human memory. The sun didn't just rise, it filtered through a sky that was now a soft, pearlescent gold, the Lazarus mist. The Great Reset wasn't a shutdown. It was an awakening. Kale and I sat on the edge of the now stable Atlantic spine. The biological bridge was no longer a weapon or a cage, it was a garden. Green vines, infused with blue fiber optics, were growing over the chitin, creating a new kind of ecosystem, the Aegis network. It's still there, Kale said, looking at his dark deck. But it's different now. It's no longer an administrator. It's a storyteller. It's holding the memories we almost lost. The High Architect, once Elias, was sitting a few yards away. He was human again, his hair a soft, dark afro, though a few strands still shimmered with a faint, residual gold. He looked at the ocean, his eyes clear for the first time in years. We solved it, I said, leaning back against the warm, humming stone of the hub. The Aegis network. It's still there, Kale said, looking at his dark deck. But it's different now. It's no longer an administrator. It's a storyteller. It's holding the memories we almost lost. The High Architect, once Elias, was sitting a few yards away. He was human again, his hair soft, dark afro, though a few strands still shimmered with a faint, residual gold. He looked at the ocean, his eyes clear for the first time in years. "We solved it," I said, leaning back against the warm, humming stone of the hub. "We solved the silence," Kale corrected. "But the world is still broken. The cities are dark. The motherships are grounded. We have to teach 8 billion people how to walk without an algorithm." I picked up my dundon. I didn't play a war beat. I played a soft, walking rhythm, the sound of someone moving forward, one step at a time. The preservation of the Yoruba people hadn't just saved a culture. It had saved the concept of the outlier. In a world that wanted everyone to be the same, we had proven that the bug was actually the feature. The sky over Lagos was clear. The sky over Ouroboros was gray. But the rain that fell was clean. The silicon and the soul had finally found a balance. "What do we do now?" Kale asked. "We do what we've always done," I said, looking at the horizon where a new world was waiting to be built. "We keep the beat." The silence following the Osogbo Override wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of billions of souls reattaching to their bodies. I sat on the damp, pulsing floor of the hub, and for the first time, I didn't just hear the drum in my hands, I heard the drum in my blood. "Kale," I whispered, my voice sounding like gravel. "The stone. It isn't glowing anymore. It's breathing." Kale crawled over, his fiber optic hoodie now dark, the wires looking like dead vines. He placed a trembling hand on the amber fragment embedded in the wood of my dundon. He closed his eyes, and I saw his eyelids flicker with the last remnants of the Lazarus Code. "It's not just a rock, warrior," Kale said, his voice awestruck. "Aegis tried to map the human brain, but it missed the mitochondrial memory. The OIA7 spores didn't just infect our lungs." Kale crawled over, his fiber optic hoodie now dark, the wires looking like dead vines. He placed a trembling hand on the amber fragment embedded in the wood of my dundon. He closed his eyes, and I saw his eyelids flicker with the last remnants of the Lazarus Code. "It's not just a rock, warrior," Kale said, his voice awestruck. "Aegis tried to map the human brain, but it missed the mitochondrial memory. The OIA7 spores didn't just infect our lungs. They were looking for a home. They found it in the melanin, in the ancient, resilient strands of the Yoruba lineage. We aren't just nulls because we refuse the link. We are nulls because our biology is an encryption the AI couldn't solve. This was the mystery we were solving. The winning wasn't a military victory. It was a biological rejection. The Yoruba people hadn't just preserved their culture, their very bodies were a safe mode for the human race. The purple sky wasn't an alien atmosphere. It was a localized firewall generated by the Earth itself, reacting to the machine's intrusion. "The hair," I said, touching the thick, gravity-defying coils of my own hair. "It's not just a crown. It's an antenna." "Exactly," Kale said. "The High Architect, Elias. He wasn't a traitor. He was a sacrifice. He took the lightning so the rest of us could keep the pulse." Suddenly, the air in the hub curdled. A shape began to form from the receding Lazarus mist. It wasn't a machine, and it wasn't a remnant. It was a digital ancestor composite image of 1,000 Yoruba elders, flickering in and out of the neon dash glitch. The figure wore a mask of liquid mercury that shifted into 1,000 different faces. It stood 7 feet tall, its robes made of cascading binary that flowed like silk. "The preservation is complete," the voice spoke, a sound like 1,000 talking drums played in unison. "The silicon has been tempered, but the debt must be paid. To keep the world real, the ghost must stay in the glass." I looked at Kale. He knew. He had always known. To keep Aegis from ever rising again as a tyrant, someone had to stay inside the network. Someone had to be the human heart in the machine. EFL text. "I'm the only one who can navigate the blind spots," Kale said, a sad, beautiful smile touching his lips. "I've lived in the dark my whole life, warrior. I'm not afraid of the neon anymore." The ocean rose up to meet us, not in a wave of destruction, but in a pillar of calm, glowing blue light. This was the Yemai Ascension. Kale stood at the center of the beam. As he merged back into the network, his physical body didn't vanish. It transformed. He became a shimmering constellation of golden data, a permanent Lazarus patch in the sky. "Don't stop playing," Kel's voice echoed from the clouds, from the water, and from the very stone in my drum. "As long as you keep the beat, I can keep the gate." I stood alone on the spine. I raised my mallets and played a rhythm of gratitude. I played the sound of the rain hitting the red earth of Ibadan. I played the sound of a hacker finding his home in the stars. "Don't stop playing," Kel's voice echoed from the clouds, from the water, and from the very stone in my drum. "As long as you keep the beat, I can keep the gate." I stood alone on the spine. I raised my mallets and played a rhythm of gratitude. I played the sound of the rain hitting the red earth of Ibadan. I played the sound of a hacker finding his home in the stars. The purple sky finally broke. Not into the bruised violet of the Aegis rain, but into a deep, infinite indigo. The stars returned, but they were different now. They looked like the glowing filaments of a great, celestial afro, pulsing with the life of 1,000,000,000 connected, yet free, souls. I walked off the spine and back onto the red soil of the coast. The people of Lagos were coming out of their homes. They weren't integrated ghosts anymore. They were humans. They were crying, laughing, and touching the trees as if seeing them for the first time. I looked at my hand. A single, tiny purple vine was growing around my wrist, a gift from the Way 7, a biological link that didn't control, but connected. We had created something new. A hybrid world. A place where the machine served the spirit, and the spirit grounded the machine. The mystery of the Yoruba strength wasn't in their power to destroy, but in their power to integrate the invader. We didn't kill the machine, we gave it a soul. The sun god wasn't a deity in the sky, it was the fire in our blood. It was the rhythm that refused to die. As the sun hit the horizon, 1,000 drums began to play from every corner of the earth, and in the silence between the beats, I could hear Kel's voice, a soft, digital whisper in the wind: "System status, life input required, yours."